خدا نے مجھ کو دیا تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے ملا ہے جو بھی ملا تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، جہاں جہاں بھی گیا دل جانے لگے، جہاں جہاں بھی گیا دل جانے لگے، یہ ہے تیرا میرا ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں کی دعا جنت کی دعا کی دعا جنت کی جنت کی جنت کی یہ کامیابی شوق قدم قدم پہ ملی، یہ کامیابی شوق قدم قدم پہ ملی، نصیب ایسا ملا ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، طواف میں کیا طواف میں کیا جو میں میرا کیا ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، مجھے گرانے پہ حاسد ہوئے تھے مگر مجھے گرا ماں تیری دعاؤں سے، تیری دعاؤں سے، ماں तेरी दुआ से तेरी दुआ से कसम है इसमें उजागर का कुछ कमाल नहीं। कसम है इसमें उजागर का कुछ कमाल नहीं। उरूज से को मिला माँ तेरी दुआ से तेरी दुआ से माँ तेरी दुआ से तेरी दुआ से माँ की दुआ जन्नत की 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 माँ।
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Marisburg 105.6 FM, and audio streaming in www.alansar.org.za. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaba bikum. My name is Yunus Sacoor, and I will be in your company for the next 2 hours. I will be interviewing our guests shortly. I wasn't on air last week, and Sumaya Khan and Siraj Basa spoke on the Palestinian issue, the Middle East setup, and various other issues last week. Today, the date is the 11th of December 2024 and 10th of Jamadul Akhir 1446 AH. The weather in the last few days has been quite scorching, very humid. Temperatures averaged between 27 and 35 in Durban and surrounds. So people had to be hydrated and to make sure they don't get dehydrated, because we're into the summer months and it's going to be extremely hot in the next couple of months. We're into the heart of summer, and in the Northern Hemisphere it's winter, so people are feeling fairly cold. Our topic for today is quite diverse. We're going to chat about youth activism in politics. And we're going to look at, because it's a year end and a lot of matriculants have finished their matric exams, they want to follow a career path, and we will be looking at some of the opportunities for the youth that they can look at. And on a political front, I've always been requested to say something on politics, but I know this is not the season for politics, because most of the politicians are on leave around the December period. So people are not too keen on politics, but there's a lot of headlines on the MK's abstention in Parliament, on the ICJ funding. And that's cause for concern, because when MK was formed, and they predominantly in KZN and in Gauteng, they were close allies of the former President Jacob Zuma. And the impression that was created that they were all pro-Palestine. And we're not saying they're not, but obviously abstaining from voting, in Parliament is telling us something. And there's also some concern about the political profile in KZN, because there's 4 big parties that are emerging. And into the new year, we will be watching the performance of these parties very closely. So in the guests on the show this evening are Dr. Mohamed Hoosen Suleman. He's a recently qualified medical graduate from the University of KZN. He's also the chairperson of the Youth League of United for Palestine. And Mohamed Hoosen, has had an accomplished career throughout his studying in the medical college in KZN. He's a multi-awarding winning youth leader and an activist in the healthcare sector, having been recognized both locally and internationally for his efforts in contributing to healthcare betterment in South Africa. Among his most notable achievements is being awarded the prestigious Change Maker Scholarship at the World Health Organization Convention in May 2022 in Geneva, Switzerland. Suleman has also bestowed with the 2023 South African Health Excellence Rising Star Award and 100 South African Shining Stars Awards. So the Mail and Guardian also ranked Suleman among the South Africa's top 200 young South Africans under the age of 35. Hoosen Suleman remains an inspiration to many aspiring medical doctors. His work has yielded him special invitations to speak on the state of the South African public health system in countries such as Denmark, Switzerland, and Oman. He is also an editorial board member for International Journal of Medical Students. He is widely recognized and lauded for his academic excellence, leadership roles, and community service. But the irony of it all is that Mohamed Suleman comes from a very humble background, his father being a businessman and his mother being a housewife. So how he emerged to be such a bright spark in the medical fraternity, also in the political fraternity, in youth activism, it gives us an indication that you don't have to come from a family of professionals to emerge. So later on in the program, we'll have Dr. Faisal Suliman. He's the chairperson of SAMNET with a lot of attributes, and he will be chatting more on, the political front. But I'd like to welcome Dr. Mohamed Hoosen Suleman. Mohamed Hoosen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International.
Wa alaikum salam. And, I want to say at the outset, thank you for this invitation, for inviting me to speak about these important matters, for society, for our listeners. In your introduction, you've spoken a little of the work I do. I don't see myself as worthy for these accolades and for these praises. I'm simply doing that the little I can do, to actually make a contribution to society, to serve the health-related needs of our people. I certainly don't seek praise for that. I think that I am duty-bound by the Almighty in some small way to contribute to the upliftment to society.
No, well presented, Mohamed Hoosen, that, whatever we gain in life, whatever gains we make is all attributable through the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the commitment we make to Allah's deen. And, I know my career path from the time, I was in school and varsity, and I had a vision then, and guided by that vision and the urge to achieve those milestones, Allah makes it easy. And I see you coming from the same path, that you've got this humanitarian, effort in your mind and the need to assist humanity. And this is why Allah has blessed you with these attributes. Allah chooses whomsoever He wants to become leaders in society in whatever way and form. I mentioned when we started the program that we're going through some sweltering weather, and this is typical of December weather in and around Durban. Durban's a very subtropical area with, very, very sweltering and high humidity days. And when you get up in the morning and have a shower, and no sooner you get into your car, you're sweating and you need another shower. Now, from a medical perspective, I know you've graduated this year and you won a lot of awards. I've seen from your status that a lot of your co-students have also recommended you for these awards. So I know you've been to different hospitals and what have you, but what is your advice to our listeners out there? Because not all of them have got air conditioners to keep cool. How do they sort of organize themselves in these hot days, sweltering days? And I know when you sweat, you lose a lot of water, and people don't know they're rehydrated. So maybe as a kickoff from a medical perspective, if you can tell us what causes this hydration because of the high humidity, and what do you suggest people do to handle this?
Yes,
this problem?
Absolutely. We're in the peak of our summer, and these hot days are expected, but also together when we talk about climate change, this has been dubbed as a health, so it's a health security threat that had been put forward by the World Health Organization, by the United Nations, that as the global community, we have to conscientize ourselves. We have to be prepared for how best to deal with this issue of the climate. But as you said, that in Durban, for the past week or two, it's been extremely hot. We tend to lose water. We tend to lose fluids from our body through the various channels, but the one being where we tend to perspire. Our veins in the body, they undergo vasodilation. And so the blood flows to the surface of the body to sort of give off that heat. And so how to respond to that? We need to rehydrate. We need to take in fluids. We need to replenish those electrolytes in our body. We need to try and keep cool. If it's a hot day, of course, you want to wear light clothing. You want to don't cover yourself too much, but at the same time, don't have excessive exposure to the sun, to those UV rays. So I think the one is to ensure that, okay, if you're going to work, you need to have a bottle of water. That's part of your everyday health, whereby you have to drink at least 2 liters of water. You need to flush the body of those toxins. You need to ensure that your kidneys are fully functional and that you're flushing the body of those toxins. So one is to rehydrate, to ensure our electrolytes are replenished. 2, I would say, is the clothing. 3 is to avoid, this excessive sunlight. Don't excessively be out, because, in the summer days, we tend to enjoy our beachfront, for example. So we need to ensure that we are conscious of that. When we talk about vitamin D, that we need, this exposure to the sunlight. So a mere 10%, it's a mere 10 minutes of the day of exposure to sunlight, and in terms of our vitamin, so the vitamin D levels. So I think those are some of the general health advice that any healthcare professional would give in these excessive temperatures.
Now, to replace those electrolytes, I know one encourages the consumption of water, at least 2 liters a day, to rehydrate yourself. Does water contain those electrolytes, or do you need some supplements in addition to water?
So to some extent, in water being that neutral agent, it would be sufficient for our everyday usage. Of course, if you are one who would need those extra electrolytes, you can see it at the pharmacy and at the clinic, where they will give you oral rehydration solution, etc. But I think for the general public, in that water, it would be sufficient to ensure that we can do our day-to-day activities.
Now, what are the signs of dehydration? How would people know that they got less fluids in their body because of the high degree of perspiration?
Yeah.
And loss of fluids are not replaced by the intake of fluids. Some of the key signs, because a lot of our elders out there, maybe they're not used of having much water and they don't know the dehydrating. So, dehydration can be a major problem.
Yeah.
So perhaps if you just want to
Sure.
advise, especially our field workers and our elderly people who don't consume a lot of fluids, what are some of the signs? Because we don't want a situation where suddenly, some person is like collapsing or feeling out of sorts and they don't know they're dehydrating.
Sure. So with some of the signs, it will be fatigue, it will be weakness and exhaustion. The skin will be pale, it will be dry, you'll feel excessively thirsty. So it's the general weakness, the fatigue. The skin will, it will of course be dry, you'll have dry mouth. And this can then progress to a heat stroke, which of course will be a quite severe form. So those, I would say, are some of the signs or the early symptoms that will tell you that you are dehydrated, and should alert you then to be increasing your intake of your fluids. I would say, those are some of the signs.
Those individuals, particularly at night, a lot of individuals have fans and air cons that they put on at a regular temperature, so it keeps the room cool. A lot of our brothers and sisters in Phoenix and Chatswood cannot afford aircon, and they probably have a fan at home. And during a hot, sweltering night like the last few weeks, they're sweating, and in the morning they get up with a headache and sweaty bodies and what have you. Uh, how would they get alerted that they're dehydrating while at sleep or whatever? I'm just trying to give some telltales to our people that these are sweltering days. Don't take chances, because some people get up with major problems.
Yes. So those are some of the signs that they would generally experience, these few symptoms that I've touched on. But in terms of how they should deal with it, you get cold compressors. You can keep a cold towel with some ice by your side to try and cool your body, as in when you feel hot, to be keeping ice water, on the side of you. But also it's the general lifestyle measures. You want to overall keep healthy. You want to ensure, because it can't be that it comes to the end of the year, we are now conscious of our health. We need to be health conscious all the time, for the entire year. We need to exercise every day. We need to be eating healthy, etc. So I think for those who do not have the privilege of an aircon, of a fan, is to stay out of the heat. One, two, to keep on your side these cold compressors, a cold towel with some ice and with ice water, and to be, of course, increasing your fluid intake.
Even if you had to get up at late hours of the night just to take a few sips of water if your mouth is dry.
Absolutely.
Just to make sure you're adequately hydrated. I know a lot of people want to avoid urinating in the late hours of the night or early hours of the morning. And, we know that there's a different methodology for those that have diabetes and other complications, where they have to realize that the sugar levels must be in order. So from a health perspective, these are some of the tips you give. You have proper hydration, stay away from the sunlight, try to avoid getting into an area where you're sweating and the humidity is high, and take care of your body during these periods of time, because as you said, the veins and the bodies do react to situations like this, and you can end up being hospitalized with drip to really get rehydrated. And instead of pumping a lot of cool drinks, which a lot of people have a tendency to do nowadays, is to go in a fridge and take that 1 liter of Coke out and sip it down, because it's such a quenching thirst. But with such high sugar levels, I think the youth can cope with it, but the elderly people, what do they do? Do they get tempted because they need the sugar levels in their body, or do they have to be careful?
Of course, you have to be conscious. If you're at risk for high blood sugar, you can't obviously be quenching your thirst on those cool drinks. So you might as well want to stick to your juices and with water. That goes without saying. You don't want to increase the intake and to raise the blood sugar levels, of course, yeah.
Dr. Mohamed Suleman, I don't want to do an examination on your medical ability, but just one final question. In terms of an increase in sugar levels, and I know a lot of our Indian South Africans are typical, sort of individuals that can have diabetes which they don't know about until they have it tested. Some of the signs of high sugar, because you're tempted to have a lot of fluids, juices, cold drinks during this period of time, because it's natural to be thirsty, and sometimes it's good for the body because your sugar levels dropping. What are the signs of a dropping sugar level and an elevated sugar level? Just briefly, and then we'll move into our main subject for the day.
Yeah. So for high blood sugar, you commonly see cases of what we call polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia. With polyuria, you are frequently urinating. You go to the toilet often. You are frequently thirsty. You are frequently hungry. Those are the signs for high blood sugar level. And in the hospital setting, we see cases of these. It's an emergency setting where the patient will present with diabetic ketoacidosis, for example, and then you know that there's a risk for type 1 diabetes. So those are some of the signs. In the severe cases, you'll see complications of the high blood sugar, and the complications being it affects your eyes, your kidney, or your heart. So those are some of the signs, of high blood sugar. With low blood sugar, again, it's the fatigue, headache, the exhaustion, you feel weak, which then, if a person is at risk, there's a family history, or there's a history of these kinds of symptoms, you want to regularly test yourself. You want to go to the clinic to have these tests. When you present yourself to the clinic, there are various tests that they can do. They can do a spot check on your glucose. They can do the fasting blood glucose. They can do the oral glucose tolerance test. These are all for the diagnostic purposes in the case of diabetes. So, of course, we must be health conscious. We must, keep up with the health advice that's given to us by healthcare professionals. Yeah.
Okay. Those are some of the signs of low and high blood sugar. I thought let's share that with Dr. Mohamed Hoosen Suleman. He's freshly graduated from medical school, and during these hot days, those that have diabetes and pressure and other medical problems, it's very important that you understand how to handle those health conditions in these hot days. But as Dr. Hoosen mentioned, hydration is extremely important, and water washes out the toxins, and it does more good than harm, and you urinate all those toxins. It's good for the body. On that note, we'll take a break for the Isha Azan, and inshallah we'll continue our discussion after Isha, inshallah.
This Azan is sponsored for the Isale Sawab of Marhum Muhammad Farooq Latib and all Marhumin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them the highest abode in Jannah. Ameen.
أعزائي المستمعين، حان الآن موعد أذان العشاء لمدينة دربن وما حولها.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة والدرجة الرفيعة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته وارزقنا شفاعته يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
This dua brought to you by Simplex Radio, South Africa's leading retailer of appliances, car sound and home theater systems.
These surahs after Azan are brought to you by Amina's Wonder Spice and Wonder Dates, 9 Peters Road, Springfield, Durban.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس.
This salah is proudly brought to you by Khan's Chemical Industry. May this salah enlighten your soul and bring about endless blessings throughout your day. This salah was proudly brought to you by Khan's Chemical Industry. May this salah enlighten your soul and bring about endless blessings throughout your day.
Having a clean, comfortable home is every homeowner's pride. That's why Khan's Chemicals have developed and manufactured prime yet affordable quality household brands Starlight, Miracle Mum, Exterminate, and Angie to care for your home and family. With a wide range of fabric softeners, dishwashing liquids, bleachers, and all-purpose cleaners, pine gels, bubble baths, and much more, Khan's Chemicals ensures your home remains our #1 priority. For sales and other inquiries, call 011 933 4021. Khan's Chemicals, cleaning your home the way you want.
The chaos and destruction in the Gaza Strip is beyond comprehension. Virtually everyone is displaced, hungry, and in urgent need of life-saving humanitarian support. The Al-Imdad Foundation has been working tirelessly to address the health, nutrition, and water needs of the population. Our hospital, water deliveries, and hot meal programs are made possible with your support. Your donation, big or small, is a lifeline for those in dire need. Help Gaza survive. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Have you been accredited for Hajj? Khidmatul Awam Pilgrim Services is here to ensure you have the most fulfilling journey of a lifetime. We are South Africa's leading national Hajj service provider, making the pilgrimage an attainable and affordable reality for all. Our packages are fully inclusive of all Ministry of Hajj costs, and we offer a wide range of hotel combinations to suit your budget. Don't miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to complete your Hajj pilgrimage pilgrimage. Book your package with Khidmatul Awam Pilgrim Services today and make your journey a memorable one.
Hey Irfan, have you heard about the Durban Summer Souk? It's happening from the 24th of December to the 5th of January at the Exhibition Centre.
Yeah, I've seen the ads. Over 300 stalls, right? Local and international stuff. What's the deal? You think it's worth checking out?
Absolutely. They've got food stalls, and I'm talking everything from burgers to sushi to street food. Could be a perfect excuse to leave the diet at home for the day.
Well, I'm not complaining about that. Sounds like a good spot to take the whole family. You know, they've got entertainment every day, plus some carnival games for the kids. I'm sure my son would love that.
Same here. And there are big prizes up for grabs as well. So who knows? I might win a brand new gadget or two.
I'll believe it when I see it, But hey, with all that's going on, it sounds like a great day out. From midday to midnight. So there's no rush.
Exactly. Perfect way to kick off the summer. Shopping, eating, games. Sounds like the whole package. We should go together. Let's make a day of it.
All right. You know what? You sold me. Durban Summer Souk. Here we come.
This segment is brought to you by Kenfield Auto, your RMI approved service and repair specialist. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Kenfield Auto.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا.
Car won't start?
Kenfield Auto.
Noisy brakes?
Kenfield Auto.
Due for a service?
Kenfield Auto. Kenfield Auto, the answer to all your car problems. Your service and repair specialist for your VW, Audi, Suzuki, Toyota, or just about any vehicle. Kenfield Auto, your RMI and insurance approved workshop to handle them all. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Call us on 031 207 2399. Kenfield Auto.
Radio Al Ansar, Durban, 90.4 FM. Peter Maritzburg, 105.6 FM.
Listen to News in Focus on Radio Al Ansar, Durban 90.4 and Peter Maritzburg 105.6 FM every Wednesday from 8 p.m. with Yunus Sacoor. That's 8 p.m. every Wednesday, Radio Al Ansar, keeping you informed.
تیرے حرم کی کیا بات مولا تیرے حرم کی کیا بات مولا تیرے کرم کی کیا بات مولا تیرے حرم کی کیا بات مولا تیرے کرم کی کیا بات مولا تا عمر کر دے آنا مقادر اللہ کی کیا بات مولا کی کیا بات کیا بات رب مجھ کو بلائے گا میں کعبے کو دیکھوں گا وہ دن بھی تو آئے گا میں کعبے کو دیکھوں گا رب مجھ کو بلائے گا رمضان مبارک میں سامنے کعبے کے رمضان مبارک میں سامنے کعبے کے افطار کرائے گا افطار کرائے گا میں کعبے کو دیکھوں گا وہ दिन भी तो आएगा मैं काबे को देखूंगा.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al-Azhar International, broadcasting on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Marisburg 105.6 FM, and audio streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Before the news break, we were chatting with Dr. Mohamed Hoosen Suleman. He's a recently qualified medical graduate, and he was chatting about some medical conditions in these hot days that we're having, and he gave us some very good advice on how to hydrate ourselves and what are the telltales relating to dehydration, etc. But I want to change our discussion towards career pathing and opportunities for prospecting matriculants. Now, we know that a lot of matriculants have finished their exams and they've already applied to the different universities, for career paths that they want to follow. Now, because Mohamed Hoosen is a medical graduate and a lot of our students out there have applied, for seats in the medical school, I'd like him to give us some indications when he was in metric, what prompted him to study medicine, and if so, how did he cope in the 6 years that he studied to become one of the top students. As you know, some people are of the view, or some students are of the view that, for the 6 years, you have no life but studying. So, Mohamed Hoosen, perhaps firstly you can apprise our listeners that when you were in metric, I'm not sure where you matriculated. I'm sure you must have got, probably all A's in your various subjects. But you decided some time earlier in your career that, listen, this is a profession I want to follow. I come from a family of businessmen or commercial individuals, but I've got an aptitude for medicine, and I have been successful in that path because I chose the right path. So what prompted you, and exactly when in your studies you decided that you're going to go the medical route?
Yes. So I schooled at Orient. And I think for me, it was always a passion to become an engineer. I had strong interest in physical sciences and it was in mathematics, where I was quite fond with the subjects. I was quite fond of science and how things work. And so naturally, I thought from my schooling days, I wanted to be an engineer. And so after matriculating, I then sought advice in the engineering field. I spoke to Dr. Abdul Mirza, who's a physicist, and he's based at the Westville campus, at the UKZN, the Westville campus. And so he's a friend of my sister, and I sought advice from him and from others. And I found that for engineering, there's no real scope for you to have progressed in the field. You perhaps need to move abroad. I then consulted with my elders and with the whole host of people, and I decided I want to come into health sciences. I then entered into the pharmacy curriculum. I studied 4 years there. I graduated in 2018. I then went into the medical field, thinking that I want to be hands-on. I want to be that first point of contact with the patients. And I'm so glad that, it has happened in the way it has. It has opened my mindset, my horizons, my thinking, and the maturity in the application of your mind, to issues as and when they arise. So I think that in short, from school days, I had always not known I wanted to be a medical doctor. And I suppose that as you progress, you then find out exactly where your passion lies and your interests.
So that prompted you to get into medicine. First, you had sort of thoughts about engineering, then you went into pharmacy, and finally you realized that's the route I'm going towards, and you've done extremely well. Now, some of the matriculants are sure from maybe grade 11 or 12 or even grade 10 that our aptitude is to a particular career path. Now, what's your advice to those that have recently matriculated and haven't made up their mind? What kind of guidance you can give them for what career to follow?
Yes, I would think firstly is to follow your passion. Two, to consult with people, consult with experts in the various fields that you would potentially consider. 3 is to consult your parents. I think that the du'as and the blessings of your parents, your mom especially, there's no stronger weapon. There's probably nothing stronger than to receive their blessing. And I would say 4 is to ask yourself a question. If I were to project myself 10 to 20 years from now, where do I see myself? Is it in the accounting world? Is it as an attorney, as an engineer, as a medical doctor, as a specialist? You ought to be asking yourself those kinds of questions. But equally, you must have known as to what opportunities would lie ahead for you. And I think when you ask yourself those kinds of questions, those kinds of critical questions for your future, because ultimately it's your future, and you hold the opportunities, you are responsible for what you are going to make of your life. And so, with the education, the support of your parents, of your siblings. So in my case, I was quite fortunate to have a strong support system at home. My siblings, my parents, who would always be there for me. My smaller sister, Naima, so we were in the same class. We had actually graduated together. We start internship at the King Edward Hospital. And
so she's also a doctor.
Yes. She's also a medical doctor, and
she caught you up because you moved in another direction,
yes.
And then she went direct into medical science.
Yes, so she did 2 years it was in pharmacy, and she changed over as well. And I'm so glad to have her by my side, as a support system. If I need advice, if I need motivation, and I need inspiration. So
both of you are at King Edward together in your internship.
Yes, we start internship on the 1st of January at the King Edward Hospital. So I think that in short, the advice I can render is to always consult with your elders, always be asking questions, where do I want to go in life? To be asking yourself from 10 to 20 years from now, what do I want to do in life? And to be asking those questions, you'll eventually search for those answers, and to be passionate about what you do. You're passionate about accounting, you ought to go under the tutelage and the mentorship of good accountants, of those who have progressed in the field, so that you're able to take those kinds of skill set, those kinds, of that work ethic, and to use it for yourself.
Now, Mohamed Hoosen, you mentioned a very important point about opportunities post-graduating. For example, when you had the aptitude for engineering, what prompted you not to go that route was the limited opportunities that may be prevailing at the time. And as you went into pharmacy, where there are better opportunities, but then you moved towards medical science, and your sister followed that direction as well. A lot of individuals that are matriculating, and they've got to apply for places in university, and they must have certain pass rate. Obviously, they have to keep into mind the job opportunities prevalent with a qualification. But not every individual gets the pass rate to be allowed to study in the top career opportunities, for example, medical, accountancy, engineering, pharmacy, etc. Others may just scrape a matriculated exemption, and perhaps they want to get into technical fields because there's a lot of opportunities in the technical side of things. So what's your advice to those individuals? Because they come from poor families, and obviously affordability at universities is cause for concern. And we know that there's limited bursaries from limited organizations. And a lot of people don't want to get a good pass in metric and end up in technical and doing a menial career. Like, I know IT, there are prospects and also other technical fields, but people want to make sure that when they graduate, that there's a job opportunity, because having studied for so long, you come from a poor family, you want to go and get a job and create some earning towards the family's, income streams.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in terms of the limitations, you'd know that in KZN, they have adopted the quota system, whereby the first preference would be given to those of African ethnicity and to the black population. And for that reason, you'll find that a lot of our students from school have to then explore other opportunities. They have to go to other provinces. Some would even have to go overseas to be studying. Some go to China, some go to Mauritius. They complete the degree, come back, and they have to write an entry exam. And, in the last 2 to 3 years, I've been sharing resources with these graduates from overseas because, so at UKZN, there was an agreement between, I think, the HPCSA, whereby the exam will be set by UKZN. And so the resources that come from here would be quite relevant, it would be quite practical to use. And those entry exams are not as easy as you would think. I know of some of the graduates who had to repeatedly write the exam, to have passed, to be recognized as a graduate in the country. So you are quite right in that opportunities may at times be scarce. For the most part, it depends on your academic merit. But of course, if you want to pursue a path that's in the medical field, you have to put an application to all higher education institutions in the country. We've got, I think, 26 higher education institutions in South Africa, 10 of which offer the MBCHP program. And the new one that had come out, I believe, in Limpopo, I stand to be corrected, that's probably in the first or second year of their opening. So if you are a matriculant, if you are in school, you want to pursue a path in the medical field, send your applications to all universities. In terms of the finances, as you said, so at UKZN, they do offer the merit scholarship. If your overall aggregate is over 80%, you then awarded a scholarship of 25,000 Rand. If you're part of the top 5, I think the award is 50,000 Rand. So I was fortunate to be awarded a scholarship, I think in my pharmacy days, that was given to only one student in the College of Health Sciences. This was, I believe, the 50th anniversary endowment scholarship. So in the College of Health Sciences is, I think, 6,200 students. And this particular scholarship I was fortunate to have received, which then serves as a means of motivation and inspiration for me that you do well, you will be recognized, you will be rewarded. And my advice that, yes, it is expensive to be studying. It is a financial strain on your parents because you are their responsibility. And but when you work hard, you're able to reap the benefit and the fruits of your work. But equally, there are multiple opportunities. So I'm fortunate to be sitting on a few committees where we actually award scholarships. We award bursaries to students. So I can, so I sit on those committees. We assess applications, and there is a need for more funding opportunities. I know the Islamic Medical Association as well. They have a bursary fund for which they would award students. So, if at any time a student is in need of help, please reach out to me or to us. We'll always be there to help.
Thank you. On that note, we'll have a news break, and inshallah, we'll continue after the news break.
An informative Islamic global perspective. This is Al Ansar News.
Making news, these are the 11th of December. The news from Durban, 90.4 FM, Pietermaritzburg, 105.6 FM. The MK party is gearing up for its first anniversary rally in Durban. I'm Eric Kimonina. Local media says that the MK party is gearing up for its first anniversary to take place at the weekend at the Moses Mabhida Stadium. The Secretary General of the MK party, Floyd Shivambu, has this to say.
The program for 2025 will include the official opening of the head office of Mkondo Wesizwe in both Johannesburg and here in Durban. So there are, of course, two wings of the head office, being in Johannesburg and here in Durban. And the program for 2025 will include the full establishment of voting district, ward, sub-regional, regional, and provincial structures, and of course, provincial and regional offices of Mkondo Wesizwe, and in the length and breadth of South Africa. The program for 2025 will also include the organic and public launches of Mkondo Wesizwe Women's League, Mkondo Wesizwe Youth League, and Mkondo Wesizwe Students Movement. The program for 2025 will also include a week-long policy conference to consolidate our policy positions and agenda for change and radical economic transformation.
More news now. Cooperative Governance MEC Thulasizwe Buthelezi is urging municipalities to tighten measures to combat the theft and vandalism of public infrastructure. Buthelezi has been reacting to the 15-year jail sentence handed to Faisal Bozama for theft at the Ezinkoleni water pump station near Port Shepstone. 2 water pumps and copper cables were stolen, severely disrupting water supply to local communities. Officials say Zama was convicted after the police and the Ugo District Municipality security team ensured a watertight case. The Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs spokesperson Senzelo Mzila says they are hoping the sentence will send a strong message. More news. The defense is expected to call its second witness, Lusanda Solani, when the trial of rape-accused pastor Timothy Omotosho continues at the High Court in Quebec in the Eastern Cape today. Yesterday, Omotosho concluded his testimony after the state cross-examined him. He denied allegations that he groomed young girls for sexual favors at his mission house in Durban. He says the girls were part of a church group. Omotosho and co-accused Solani and Zagiswa Sito are facing charges including racketeering, trafficking in persons for sexual purposes, and sexual assault. Nantombi Nama is from the ANC's Women's League. She's waiting in.
We're really concerned, and we cannot understand when you see women supporting something that is known by the majority. We're dealing with a false prophet here, and it's really amazing. It means we will have to work hard in order to correct the wrongs, because what is happening at the end of the day, these women are under, I would say, a spell of the false prophet. But there's a long road to go, but we will work on them and make sure that we bring them on board. We talk one language, because at the end of the day, this is not about women's league. It's about our children. It's about everybody. We cannot keep quiet and stand, fold our arms as if we do not see.
Morning, the Border Management Authority is on high alert. This comes after a taxi driver was arrested for trying to smuggle 25 undocumented foreign nationals into South Africa. The passengers in the taxi included 20 children who have since been taken to a place of safety. Jane Tupana, Deputy Commissioner of Corporate Affairs at the Border Management Authority, says there has been a spike in the smuggling of illegal persons into the country.
Spike in this kind of smuggling of persons, illegal people into the country, but even more concerning when it is children involved. The children had been processed and handed back to the child welfare authorities within Zimbabwe. We had to do this speedily because they were not in a good condition. The driver happened to be a South African citizen. So he has been taken into custody. He's arrested, obviously, and our colleagues in this SAPS will deal with that process, the investigations, because this is a contravention of the Immigration Act.
In your weather, it's 29 degrees. A quick reminder of our top story. Cooperative Governance MEC Thulasizwe Buthelezi is urging municipalities to tighten measures to combat the theft and vandalism of public infrastructure. That's the
Radio Al-Ansar, Durban, 90.4 FM, Peter Maritzburg, 105.6 FM.
As heavy snow and bitter winds descend on Gaza, Afghanistan, and Lebanon, hundreds of displaced and refugee families struggle to survive the winter. Without adequate shelter or clothing, the harsh weather threatens lives. Donate towards AMA's Winter Rescue Campaign to provide the food, fuel, and shelter needed by families in Gaza, Lebanon, and Afghanistan to survive the elements and provide warmth to those in need.
This dua to protect the heart is brought to you by Continental Butcher Baker Deli. Quality, freshness, and value. Our promise to you since 1992.
ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب.
If you're looking for a delicious selection of freshly made baked goods, decadent deli treats, and succulent meats, there's no need to chop around anymore. Continental Butcher Baker Deli offers an award-winning service, presenting exceptional quality at competitive prices. Superb choice grade lamb, beef, and chicken. Mouth-watering homemade processed meats and gourmet marinades, and scrumptious baked goodies. Quality, freshness, and a money-back guarantee. Visit Continental in Argyle Road.
Continental Sausage Circus, now featuring 80 different types of sausages. Hurry before there's not a sausage.
Looking for the perfect gift? Then look no further. The Al-Ansar shop has a wide range of international brands of perfumes, books, games, and also the latest in kitchenware, trendy bags, and much, much more at all affordable prices. Visit us at 207 West Road, Overport, or call us on 031 208 1601. Al-Ansar shop, your one-stop Islamic shop.
Yellow Ansar Helping Hands with Aisha Jamal brings you the Animal Welfare Campaign. Help us make a difference.
Hey little
Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, verily, there is heavenly reward for every act of kindness done to a living animal. We are in need of cat food, dog food, blankets, shelter, weatherproof kennels, and funds towards the above, as well as towards urgent cases where animals require medical attention. WhatsApp 060-971-9955 or 084-3041-683. Drop-off zone 207 West Road, Overport. Yadul Ansar, making a difference.
Radio Al Ansar, 24/7, 365.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International on the frequency Durban 90.4 FM, Peter Marisburg 105.6 FM, and audio streaming on www.alansar.org.za. Before the news break, we were chatting on the career path opportunities for prospective youth, and Dr. Mohamed Hoosen Suleman given some different scenarios. Before we contact our next guest, Dr. Faisal Suliman, who's going to talk more on the political situation in the country, I just want to quickly ask Dr. Hoosen, I know that during the course of your studies, you've been to different medical facilities, i.e. hospitals. We have many hospitals in and around Durban where you're going to be having your intern or serving your intern is King Edward, and we know there's cause for concern on the condition of that hospital together with others. Perhaps you just give us an update on the healthcare facilities and from your perspective, what needs to be done to improve these healthcare facilities.
I think first and foremost, there needs to be a political will, for the upgrade and the refurbishment of these hospitals. There needs to be adequate funds that will be made available for the servicing of these hospitals, for the upgrade of infrastructure. With this big initiative of the National Health Insurance, the NHI, you need facilities that are well equipped. You need facilities that can serve the needs, the health-related needs of our people. For the last 3 to 4 years in my studies, I've been training at a whole host of hospitals in the province, and even it was in PMB as well, the PMB complex of hospitals, they call it. And I think from, just a brief assessment and a brief observation, if I can share with you, is that the condition is quite bad. And when I say bad, I'm speaking in comparison to our private hospitals. So in South Africa, we have a 2-tiered health system. The public sector, the private sector, you need a medical aid for decent health cover, for decent healthcare services. So the state of the state of public health in the country to be observing that over the past few years. It's quite disheartening. I think that there's a lot that needs to be done on the part of the government and the Department of Health, especially in terms of infrastructure and the upgrade, but also on the human resources aspect. There's a shortage of healthcare workers. The healthcare workers are actually overburdened. So I think investment on various fronts have to be put forward by DOH.
Now, just one final question. People who cannot afford private healthcare facilities are forced to go to the public healthcare facilities, depending on where they reside. If they're in Chatsworth, then RK Khan, Prince Mshiani, and King Edward, perhaps in the south. And in the Overport area, it's either McCord's Hospital or King George or Addington in town. And all these medical facilities, as you mentioned, there's a lot of challenges, not only in the human resource side. Human resource means nurses and doctors. And what's the risk that people run, if they have an accident and they transported by ambulance to any one of these healthcare facilities? I know that there's a lot of graduates that are qualified, and in University of KZN, the standard is extremely high, and those doctors that are there have got the knowledge to deal with it. So on the one side, you have the facilities that need attention. There's limited human resources, but the risk that patients run, because more than 60% of our patients have to go to these public healthcare facilities. So they are worried that, listen, we need treatment, but we got no choice. We have to go. So is there a 90% chance that they will be recovered through the treatment? Or compared to private healthcare facilities, how does it work?
Yes. So it all depends on the state of the patient and how severe the case of the patient. And I think perhaps it's a call to the new graduates, to those who will be on call, who will be in the trauma setting, in the acute and the emergency care, in that when you take care of a patient, when you have to address the needs of a patient, you need to, you have to give it your all. So I think this is a call that we need to make to our new graduates, to be invested, to be patient-centered. In terms of the risk that the patient carries, this would largely depend on the state of the patient and how severe they are. I think our healthcare workers try their best, on the front line, to be stabilizing our patients in the trauma setting, etc. So yes, the risk, of course, is more in the public or in the state environment as compared to the private sector. In the state, there's a whole host of challenges that we've touched on. So there is a great risk, there's no doubt about that. But again, we need to conscientize our new graduates, those who will be serving on the front line, in that when a patient presents to you, you need to be fully focused. You need to give it your all to ensure you put on your best, or you can deliver the best care to the patient with the resources that you have.
Now, you will be on 1st January working at King Edward VIII Hospital, which was one of the very, major training centers for our medical graduates. If you talk to our specialists today in the private healthcare facilities, they mentioned that we spent our intern in King Edward, and we learned a lot from the trauma ward and the cases we see, because the various different specialities are there at King Edward. Now, as a graduate, as an intern, you are now reporting to a superintendent or a sort of a senior there, and you do have specialists. How is the standard in that regard to ensure that the right healthcare is given to patients? Do you have quality healthcare professionals in terms of specialists in those hospitals? Because I know I interviewed one professor who's a lecturer at UKZN, and he was also working at King Edward, and others that were working at Albert Luthuli. And for them, they feel it's a responsibility, because the majority of the patients that come in are poor people that need medical attention. So are there specialized graduates that can deal with complicated cases in these hospitals?
Yes, I think so. I think that the level of expertise is fair. It would be sufficient. It's good. It can address the needs of our patients. I think that the standard of education from some of the medical schools in the country are quite good. You know, if you'd remember in the COVID-19, in the pandemic, and the expertise that we had in the country in terms of health, it was applauded, it was rewarded by the World Health Organization. When we look at our research, or the research that was produced from South Africa. So I think that the level of expertise is good. I don't think in terms of our knowledge level from these healthcare workers, from these specialists, that there's a big problem, so to speak. Yeah, I think, or rather, my brief assessment of the situation is that we have a fair amount of knowledge from both the medical officers, and of course, as you progress to your registrar, to become a specialist. But also, there's a phenomenon called interprofessional collaboration, interprofessional education. You also consult with your peers. In that if a patient presents to you, it's a complicated case. There's nothing that stops you from seeking a second, from seeking a third opinion. Those channels of communication are there, they are established. So I don't see that as a problem insofar as how our healthcare workers serve, the health needs of our patients.
Now, this question, which maybe a lot of our individuals don't know, that when a first individual qualifies as a doctor, in the training over the last couple of years that you've been through the different hospitals, you are now put on to, the situation in the trauma ward where you are one of a couple of doctors and you have a sort of an accident, and people with broken limbs and serious head injuries are brought in. You got to deal with those patients. Being a newly qualified doctor, how do you manage that? You obviously got to stabilize the patient, and first aid individuals do that when they bring them in the ambulance. But you got to take over from there, because our listeners out there, very often, late at night, it may not be their fault. They're involved in an accident, or somebody got shot, and the ambulance takes the individual. So that immediate attention from a trauma point of view is crucial to decide how to handle that patient. So you being a newly, sort of qualified medical graduate, in the trauma ward you have 2 or 3 people, but you got to make that call. So how do you assess and make that call?
Absolutely.
So our sort of listeners out there know that, listen, although the facilities may not be good, but those personnel are of a very high caliber that qualified. They've been around, they've trained. And then like, a private medical facility, the medical attention is also appropriate for that individual to make sure they're not left in a manner which the condition will deteriorate and pass on.
Yes, so absolutely. In the trauma setting, there are fundamental principles that you have to abide by. You need to ensure your patient is stable, and we follow what we call the ABCD approach. So A is for airways, B is for breathing, C is for circulation. Does the patient have a pulse? Is the patient breathing? Is the airway compromised? Do they have a patent airway? And if there's active bleeding, you need to apply pressure. So there are certain principles that you ought to follow to ensure your patient is actually stable, whereby now you can take a short history, you can actually find out what has happened to this patient, you can refer them appropriately, etc. Is the glucose low? And for that reason, they presented in a state of hypoglycemia where you need to intervene. We talked earlier about hyperglycemia, these emergencies that we see often in the acute setting. So there are fundamental principles that you learn as a student and how to apply them, and you simply stick by them. I don't think you'll ever go wrong. And to the best of your ability, you try to stabilize your patient, you work in a team, you communicate effectively, you give instructions, So I think ultimately you stick to those principles. You would have given it your best shot insofar as care to the patient is concerned.
Shukran, Dr. Mohamed Hoosen. I think we've got Dr. Faisal Suliman, another medical doctor, on the line. Dr. Faisal, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus live on Radio Al Ansar International.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thank you for having me.
Before we got hold of you, Faisal, I was chatting with recently qualified medical graduate Dr. Mohamed Hoosen Suleman. I'm sure you know him. He's going to serve his internship in King Edward VIII Hospital. And I was just asking him some very tricky questions relating to how would he handle those emergency patients in the trauma ward. I'm sure you would have been through those. But I've got you on air for another discussion. He asked me specifically to ask you for an update on the Palestinian issue because he says you're quite au fait. Perhaps for the benefit of our listeners, I know there's been a lot of challenges in Gaza and what have you, but a lot of our listeners are not aware of the current situation, other than hearing that there's a whole lot of atrocities taking place. People are being shot daily. There's bombings all over the place, and Lebanon followed, and now Syria. Perhaps you just want to give us a perspective in the Middle East, what's happening. We got a lot of simple listeners out there, including ourselves, that want to know what's happening in the Middle East. So perhaps if you want to give us a little bit of a perspective, what's happening there, Dr. Faisal?
Yeah, Yunus, thank you so much. Before I say anything, I know, last, about a fortnight ago, we had the IMA graduation for health sciences.
Yes.
And the young man with you won all the awards at medical school. So mashallah to him. We had another young lady, an Aku young girl, won multiple awards in OT. Farah Dawood, a young lady, won multiple awards in Optom.
And yet they're so humble about it, Dr. Faisal. Yet they're so humble and they say they're doing it.
Alhamdulillah. I know Mohamed Hoosen would never say it. That's why I'm saying it. And alhamdulillah, we look forward to great things from all of them. And people don't know Mohamed Hoosen has presented internationally. He's our jet setter, mashallah, and Allah bless him and take him further as a representative. I know when we first met him about 2 or 3 years ago in an IMA meeting, I turned around and I said to people, this is the next future IMA president, and I'm sure, inshallah, he will not forget that.
Well, most certainly. But I was teasing him a lot with different medical conditions. So he says, where this accountant is coming from here, and asking me all these tricky medical questions. But I told him I interviewed a psychiatrist a couple of months ago, and I asked him some tricky questions. But that is due to our understanding of what's happening. But excellent, he's really got potential, and I'm glad to have him in the studio. But I told him, doctors are multi-skilled, and he's also quite au fait with the Middle East setup, being the chairperson of the Youth League of the United for Palestine. So I didn't want to tackle him too much on that. He told me, you're the guy that knows more about what's happening there. So I thought, let's hear it firsthand from you, Dr. Faisal.
I hope many of the listeners listened last night when we had Professor Anthony Collins live on Radio Al Ansar, just talking about strategies to stop the genocide. So, look, if we start with the simple one, Lebanon, notwithstanding the ceasefire, the Israelis are still in there on the ground, troops, tanks, killing people on a daily basis. It's just not being covered. Syria is a mess. I think that is the best way we can put it. Yes, Bashar al-Assad has fallen, but you have now a failed state. And the losers at the end of the day are the people of Syria, our fellow Muslim brethren. We saw Iraq turn into a failed state, Libya turn into a failed state. To some extent, initially Afghanistan also, as we all know, was a tribal warlords killing each other. And now, why is Syria related eventually coming down to Palestine is because a lot of, as we know, Israel is actually in cahoots with Turkey and others. Maybe, Russia, the United States, all have interest in those oil wells. And one of the best things that has happened is the fall of Syria, orchestrated with the Israeli intelligence, with Israeli help, Israeli armaments, which means the Israelis can now, they've secured the Lebanon, they've now secured another front in Syria, West Bank, the other occupier territories, all, daily massacres, daily tortures, etc., being persecuted, perpetrated. So now you're left with Gaza, with the world's attention not focused there and almost justified for what happened on 7th of October 2003 in the mind of many of these Zionists and their supporters. Unfortunately, the effect of military resistance from Hezbollah and Hamas is really been muted. Muted. The supply of arms from Iran that used to come, they were about the only ones giving arms to Hamas via Hezbollah and others, has now come to an end. Iran was actually pushed Hezbollah to sign the agreement, the ceasefire agreement with Israel, and that shows you itself Iran's strategic withdrawal, or from getting direct involvement in the conflict. I think they're more concerned about Trump and Trump's potential open declaration of war with Iran at the behest of the United States. So they've taken the strategic withdrawal. Russia has problems in Ukraine, so stop propping up Bashar al-Assad, and therefore it made the fall very easy, or easier. So the massacres continue, the denial of human rights, aid, hospitals, doctors, the assassinations of children, of shooting doctors in the head, and continues on a daily basis. And therefore, the necessity for everybody, for masjids, Yunus, to become centers of activism and awareness and raising the spirit, because honestly, it's almost as if we have become blind and deaf and mute to the suffering of the Palestinians. Yes, alhamdulillah, people, some organizations still donating money. The big organizations have plenty of money sitting with them that they have been collected. We make dua, of course, one hopes, although many masajid I attend seem to have forgotten to even make dua for these people after Fard Salah, which is very sad. And that is something maybe listeners should be pushing their alims and their trustees and the imams to make the masjid a center of focus. Even if you have a Jummah bayan on something else, it doesn't take much, on 5 minutes to remind people of the humanitarian catastrophe, the religious catastrophe, and everything else that is going on in Gaza. And of course, in occupied Jerusalem, around the Masjid al-Aqsa compound, etc. It's not just limited to Gaza. So that is continuing. What we need, Yunus, is to remind people, Tiva, any product, it is a substitute. Most Tiva products, Tiva is made in Israel, Israeli company, Clover, Cape Union Mart, all those K-way things that people wear. Tell them, if you see someone, how can you be wearing this? This is direct putting money into the Israel's hands. Those are three easy ones. And of course, Discovery Medical Aid, Discovery Insurance, Discovery any other, the bank, etc. Medical aid's harder. There is a move ahead with that. People are working on that, but not easy just to swap your medical aid day. But clearly you can move your short-term insurance, your life insurance, any other Discovery Bank, Discovery credit card. We have to show punishment to people who openly are in alliance with murderers of people. I mean, the Discovery went into alliance with this Future of Health people, and the 4 people who came to South Africa a few weeks ago were all part of the Israeli IDF. There were one of the heads was a combat surgeon in the IDF, the head of the Future of Health, and yet Discovery chose to align itself with people like this. When all over the world, the Norwegians, people in Denmark, etc., are pulling out their money, are saying, people are blocking factories in Europe, saying you can't send supplies to Israel, and Discovery willingly and I think knowingly did this. So we have to at least do that. Allah commands it. As in Surah An-Nisa, Allah says, stand up firmly, uses the word firmly for justice, even if it be against your parents. So we have no excuse. Allah commands it of us. And therefore, boycotts, supporting murals, supporting with funding, not just the human relief aid, but organizations involved in resistance, whether it's SAMNET, whether it's the PSF, it takes effort, it takes money. Yunus, I don't know how much time we have to chat, but I posted a video today with Normal Finkelstein. I'll just give you an example, and this is what he spoke about. He spoke about the fact that his childhood friend, who's now late, was a brilliant mind, MIT graduate, the whole toot. And he became, as he called him, the terrorologist for the State Department, the analysis, the working out of how to attack and how to, all those. I know people probably know that a lot of the bombings were done by AI. They used AI technology and people's cell phones, Yunus, to target a doctor, not when he's alone. They waited for him to get into his house with his family and then bombed him. then sent a drone using AI to work out who should be killed, how should they be killed, for thousands of people like this last year. Right now, this normal Finkelstein talks about this. This is what his friend was good at, and he says, he told him, how can you be doing this? But anyway, then he realized. He says, he was talking about those pages, those 3,000 pages, that what kind of planning and forward thinking does it take to get pages, to get cell phones, plant little bombs in them and wait till they get into the mainstream public, that they are bought by people. I mean, this kind of thinking. So anyway, the point he makes is this. He says, I thought to myself, okay, my friend has passed away. But like him, the Pentagon has got 10,000 other brilliant, the best minds out of university, out of MIT, out of the top universities, hired and paid for. 10,000 like him. So Hamas and Hezbollah never stood a chance. This is what he's saying. Hezbollah never stood a chance against minds like this. And what is that? Yunus, that is allocating resources, allocating money to brain power, to resources power, to time power. What do we do? Myself included, we try and do what we can with our day jobs. We have 2 day jobs. In my case, the IMA, SAMNET, 1 or 2 other things. Everybody else who's involved in this work has a full daytime job. And then we think it's going to be able to attack and break down this machinery when it needs full-time power, resources, money, brain power, sitting every day, plotting and scheming. And that takes money. It takes us to pay people. And until, Yunus, we don't reach a stage where Muslims decide, I mean, listen, my own wife does Caring Sisters Network, as you know, partners with Al Ansar, there's all this charity and boreholes and all that. But until we don't say that 5, 7, 8, 10% of what we are spending has to be diverted to strategic use, to pay people to sit down and plan and do things, we are wasting our time.
Definitely. Faisal, just to summarize what you said to the listeners out there, many of them are ignorant of what's happening. Can we summarize and say that the Middle East is in a mess currently? Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc., they just complicit in working with USA. Israel is basically through USA controlling the world economy, and is sort of materialism or the economy their objective? What is Israel's game plan here?
So, Judaism is a 4,000-5,000-year-old religion. Zionism is at best a 150-year-old philosophy, a racist, exclusive ideology. The ideology of the two, right-wing Judaic fundamentalism, as some people would say, the Saudi family and Abdul Wahab had they suited each other. Two hands put together made a very strong fist. That they needed each other. One religious legitimacy, one political and economic power. Right. Same thing here. Zionist fundamentalism combined with religious fervor of a greater Judea, what Henry Ford, the manufacturer of the Ford company, spoke about in his books, and others have written about the greater plan to take over the entire area, the greater Judea, including what present Saudi Arabia, Egypt, right up to the Nile. Right. Combine that with this philosophy, that false philosophy they have drummed and convinced the right wing, what Professor Anthony Collins, the Messianic the Christians, those who believe that the Messiah will only return once the Jews are in control of that whole area. So they help them. They help them from two perspectives. One is from a religious philosophy that the Messiah will only return when the Jews are in control, and therefore they must help them to wipe out the Arabs, more or less, or the Palestinians. Secondly, that for economic and geopolitical reasons, the kind of chessboard we see happening in Ukraine and everywhere else, you need an Israel there. You need a power, a disrupting power and influence in there who can make sure there's no Arab unity, there's no economic unity that you could have had, for example, in the OIC or in OPEC. OPEC, of course, is there all in name. There's no unity of controlling supply and demand of oil prices, more or less. It's what Saudi does its own thing now, Russia does its own thing, Turkey does its own thing. But so for those two combination of those reasons, economic and political, you needed an Israel there and not anywhere else. They've got the support for whether it's for religious reasons, economic, or make sure you destabilize the Middle East. In other words, for power. Remember, notwithstanding solar and energy, for the foreseeable future, oil is still power. The world still runs on oil. And for that reason, you control the supply and control of oil and the price, but mainly the supply. You dominate your order, which is what we see happening. And therefore, for all of those reasons, Israel gets its support. And for them, it serves their purpose. They have this. They don't hide it. Yunus, these people don't hide it. They tell you openly. There's plenty of videos of Netanyahu, of the right, the Smotrich and all of these people, Ben-Gvir, openly saying we have to massacre Palestinians, we have to take over this whole area. They're not even hiding it. So the question is how we are allowing it to happen within what we can do. Yes, Jewish community sending soldiers. They're sending mercenaries, Afrikaners, etc. They're bringing in Indian soldiers, whatever. We're not sending our young people, but there's a lot more we can do except besides dua and collecting money, which perhaps is what we tried to get through Anthony Collins last night. And what, maybe we need a full discussion on what we can just be doing as a community more to help the Palestinian cause.
Most certainly, Faisal, will dedicate a program to that so that our listeners do understand another role we play. But I'd like to, Dr. Mohamed Hoosen Suliman wants to raise a question, or not. Bringing this back to the South African situation, and that's our subject for this evening, is MK's abstention in Parliament in terms of finances, additional finances for the court case that South Africa took to the ICJ. And there's, various articles coming. And we know the MK has been a breakaway from the ANC, and they're very strong in KZN and in Gauteng. Now, there's articles coming through where MK party says there's room for improvement in holding KZ's government of provincial unity to account. Yet they are the majority in KZN, and how they got swept the carpet under their feet, we don't know. But what is, the general view on MK's position in terms of their avoidance or abstention from voting for funding, additional funding for to deal with the ICJ?
Yes, extremely disappointing. Yes. So to give you the context, they were now passing a whole lot of appropriation bills, setting aside funding basically for not just the ICJ, but it was a whole 5 billion rand bill that was being looked at for various entities. And one of them was 100 million rand set aside to pay for this case. Now, I think people have to understand that what you have, 100 million is a lot of money, but you've got multiple senior counsels who are doing nothing else but dedicating to researchers, workers, traveling costs, going to The Hague, engaging, paying the court costs, etc. So it's a huge expense. And I think credit to the African National Congress as well as our government, because it is the ANC at the end of the day who pushed for this. It wouldn't have happened without the ANC's pushing for it. Yes, we have problems with them in other areas, but not clearly, where praise is due, we must give it. That they pushed for it, and they've allocated money before this, as people will know, a long ongoing case, and there's still a lot more to be done. And therefore, this 100 million was put on the in the appropriations for people to vote on. Extremely disappointing that MK chose not to support it and they abstained. When I look at the statement, they talk about a whole lot of things. It's a load of nonsense that, why isn't there sanctions against Israel? Why isn't there implementation of anything else? And therefore, if you're not doing this, you mustn't do this. It's like someone saying, well, if I'm not reading namaz, I might as well not keep my roza as well. Or might as well, I don't read namaz, why should I bother with Hajj? That sort of illogicality. And the same thing here, when you read that statement from MK, extremely disappointing. There are many Muslims who've been funding, promoting MK, who should take note of this. And then the other reason they give is that the DA voted for it. Very surprisingly, well, look, it is part of the negotiations that are going on behind the scenes with the government of national unity. There's a quid pro quo. There's, Bella Bill. There's other things on the DA is going to say, okay, we'll support you on this one. But, we want your support or you must kill that one. So the DA voted for it, and the MK's one of the reasons they give, well, if the DA voted for it, it's white monopoly capital, we're not going to vote for it. I think this is an extremely poor reflection of the MK on its commitment to what it calls social justice. So it talks first, in its first line, it says how committed it is to the Palestinian cause. And then it just goes on to give a whole lot of weak reasons as to why it didn't vote for this. And which is a problem, because clearly, those senior councils, etc., need to be paid for. And it goes back to what I spoke about earlier on. You want brains, you want things to be done, you need to pay for them. You cannot expect only volunteerism. So anyway, coming back to this, Yunus, extremely disappointing. There were many people who were looking favorably at maybe Zuma has turned the corner. Maybe he really is interested, possibly in a sort of a righteous party, even though he's put in all of the old people with scandals around them, whether it's from, Eskom, Prasa, Transnet, at the VBS, all of those scalums from there, alleged scalums, fingered in the Zondo Commission, etc., with him, the top of his leadership. One would have perhaps, but this is a very clear indication that someone else is pulling the strings. I think there was always rumors that a lot of the funding for MK came from Israel, from Zionists, and one of the reasons was to break the back of the ANC. One of the reasons being the ICJ case that promises work. You remember on this very show, Yunus, I spoke repeatedly before the elections about how the Zionists were going to attack the ANC and punish them for the Palestinian stance. And one of the things that was said is that the money didn't come from Russia. The DA wanted to point out to Russia funding the MK, but I think I heard from other sources that it came from Zionists, and now the Zionists are pulling the strings. So, very disappointing.
The MK party is gearing up for a major milestone, its first anniversary rally. It's holding a press conference ahead of celebrations this weekend at the Moses Mabhida Stadium, and the party Secretary General Floyd Shivambu is addressing the media. And we know this fellow was with EFF, and EFF has got another position on Gaza, and they cornered Ramaphosa on his stance. So are these politicians using the Palestinian/Gaza issue as a tool to woo votes from voters? And because obviously we want to get on to briefly before we close on the political profile in KZN, because we know leading into 2026, MK is going to make take quite a stance on wooing more voters. So how do you see the situation? Because now on the one side, we've got the GNU and the DA is linked up with the GNU and Israelis, or the DA is pro-Israel or pro-Zionist. And Ramaphosa has now, through the ANC government, backed the ICJ matter. EFF is supporting, MK is going another route, GNU is supporting. So how do you see this whole thing panning out, Faisal?
Yunus, I think the first thing we must know or understand that politicians have a very short time span and a very short outlook. The next election is as far as they look. And the cause that gets them to the next election is what they're interested in. If you remember, I used to say on your very show before when we were trying to encourage people to register to vote, a community of 2 million people is of less use to a politician, or who don't register to vote and who don't vote, is of less use to the politician, to a community of 50,000, but on the day of voting, they know that 49,000 or 45,000 of that 50,000 will be out there to vote. You can be 2 million. You can be the 10 million Latinos in the United States, or in the New York, greater New York area, etc. Right? If you're not voting, and the 2 million Jewish people in that area are voting, they are of more political use to you than the 10 million Latinos. And that is politics. So whether it is using Zuma must fall when it suited them, whether it is using fees must fall, or airtime must fall, or the Palestinian cause, all of the politicians will do what and Mr. Malema is the master of it, the master of populist rhetoric without substance, with flip-flopping. Today one thing, tomorrow another, is Mr. Malema. Yes, he's been consistent from day one to say, he supports the Palestinian cause. So it's never been we support Zionism, etc. But the actual action of anything in the EFF has said leaves a lot to be desired. As for Mr. Ramaphosa, he's got a few hats. He's got the old guard in the ANC who are strongly aligned to Palestine, the old guard, getting fewer and fewer between. The new guard are businessmen, and if you want to be a successful businessman and get BE deals and all of this, and have boardships on JSE companies, you need to be in Zionist good books. The New Guard are different. That's the ANC pushing him. And of course, in government, he's now sitting with the very Zionist supporting organizations, IFP, Patriotic Alliance, the DA, and these are openly supportive of Israel and Zionism. So he has a lot of strings to pull and to juggle. Will Mr. Malema use the poll? You asked, of course he does. He does it depending on the rhetoric and the headlines he wants to get into the papers. Floyd Shivambu clearly was part of that Fees Must Fall, Zuma Must Fall, also fingered in VBS scandals, moved, as you say, very quickly into Secretary General because they needed an organizer. Let me give you a simple example, Yunus, if I can use this example. You see, look at the fate of the PAC. Now, in a country where 13% of the land belonged to black people at the time of the change of government or the dawn of democracy, and 87% of land belonged to white people. You would think a party whose primary focus was land, could automatically get huge number of votes. And yet, as we know, they have failed miserably. One vote, one seat in parliament in Mr. Mandela's time. After that, I think one seat, Patricia de Lille, when she left them, they dissolved. And today they are non-entity politically. Now ask yourself, how is it that when so much, the land everywhere, and yet this party can't make it? Because you need organizational skill. You need boots on the ground. You need money, officers, payment, buses, bossing people, all of this. For a 40-year-old organization predating the ANC, whose policies were based on principle. You had very ethical, principled people in the PAC, and yet you ask yourself, how is it they never made it? Yet, look at Mr. Malema when they left for the ANC. Within a few months, regalia, structure, money, flags, T-shirts, buses, all of this. MK. Now ask yourself, how did MK out of nowhere come? Mr. Zuma said he didn't have money to pay his legal fees. And suddenly, the type of organization, I'm in the township, I have seen those gazebos, those vans, the loudhailers, the T-shirts, my own patients included. There is millions of money coming in. And who's suddenly providing all of this money? There's your answer to which direction a politician or these political parties will take and what line they will take. Who has provided the funding to these parties that within a matter of a few months, they have structure? And you're quite right. I know how well they are organizing at the moment. The 2026 election, I think, will see a landslide sweep of many municipalities, whether they deliver or not, and it'll take them another 10 years to people to realize, oh, this was another, our turn. I'm sure people are familiar with this thing that it's our turn to eat. In other words, the others ate. They did all the things that have got us into the mess and bankrupted the city and other cities. But when these new breed come in, it's not about delivering. It's not about fixing things. It's about our turn to eat. And that is the scary part. That is the extremely scary part. And they have a great organizer now in Floyd and the money to organize branches. That's what he was brought in for. Who goes from a non-entity, a deputy with no hope of ever becoming a president while Mr. Malema is alive, to within a few months become the Secretary General of a growing, powerful organization? And it is. Notwithstanding what we think of it, MK is now highly organized. They are bringing in smart people. They've got money. And that is the dangerous aspect of all of this.
Now, Faisal, I recall when I was in government many years ago, about 15 years ago, some of the DA politicians mentioned to me, and we were pro-ANC at that point in time because democracy is what we followed. And this particular individual, a white individual, told me that come 2024, we're going to split the ANC with the finances, and exactly what you're saying has happened. And obviously, they realized that those that were dissatisfied with the ANC in KZN and in Gauteng split. And there was an overwhelming victory for them in KZN. And going into 2026, it's cause for concern because, as you mentioned, they're going to continue with the gains they've had while they were with the ANC, because these are the breakaway guys that have been cited in the Zondo Commission and they want to take over to such an extent that the ANC is now asking the leadership here to relook at their performance in KZN. And there were rumors that they may dissolve the PEC, but they couldn't do that tactically because Mashatila came this weekend and he was sort of looking at one of the wards in Piemberg, and he reassured those that continued to be with the ANC that, your jobs are still there. So going into 2026, we have 4 parties in KZN that are going to go for voting. The DA through the GNU with the ANC. Or whether they'll combine, we don't know. I don't think so. And then you've got the IFP that's quite strong in KZN and MK. So how do you see the situation unfolding? Because you've got a lot of Indian voters in particularly in the eThekwini region in KZN. And obviously the voting is going to be ward-based. And we'll discuss that more going forward in the new year. But what I want to sort of have a bird's eye view of the political profile in KZN. How do you see it panning out going forward in the new year? Because there's going to have to be a lot of preparatory work in 2025 for the 2026 elections.
Yunus, it's not far away at all. 12 months next year, another 4 months, maybe 5 months by April, maybe probably expect. So at most 16 months, 17 months away. The one question there isn't time clearly, but we have to ask is what is the Muslim community doing? We had an independent party in the NFP, etc., who, didn't get the votes. And now we have to be juggling between, these other parties who don't serve our interests very often. So to ask to a bird's eye view, firstly, the fact that the IFP have got the premier and have got MECs gives them, being in power gives you a lot of access to resources, vehicles, being able to put people in various strategic positions. So it's in the IFP's interest to deliver as much as it can now in the next year, right? To win people over to say, we can deliver, we can fix, we can get roads fixed. And this is how low the bar is, how bottom of the barrel you are, that if you can tar a road and you can fix lights or clean a pavement, you're a very good deliverer of services. That's where we've come to. Forget about better things and higher things and audit reports and all of this. Just tar the roads, clean the verges, make sure that there's no potholes and water and lights are being, that's what people are getting, and you're actually great. Really, that's how bad it is. But point being, IFP will do that if they're smart at all. The DA will continue to play the race card, especially among upper middle class whites. Definitely, Indians especially. Phoenix and Chatsworth have been large number of supporters, and just like the Muslims in the Western Cape and the Colours in the Western Cape all of these years. So the DA will continue to play that. The MK, I see them organizing. I see great strides coming from them. The conundrum is the ANC. Even in our own municipality, as you know, having been there before, it's dysfunctional. Our municipality is dysfunctional. A big metro like what was it, Yunus? 10 billion in credit a few years ago. That's how strong we were. We were one of the strongest municipalities in the world, let alone South Africa, financially. We are broke now. There isn't money for anything. Mohamed Hoosen will tell you at the moment, my son is finishing off his internship. There isn't money to pay for a simple thing like a small operation in theatre. There isn't money in King Edward in the orthopedic department. And this is the delaying operations, etc. I want to say we'll get the reality of it when it starts next year. How bad things are. Linen. Baragwanath Hospital, it's out of KZN, doesn't have linen, Chris Hani. Even I worked in these hospitals in the height of apartheid. Things were, of course, bad. We didn't have a situation where we didn't have a K-wire and medicine to go do a simple. We didn't have money for sets or orthopedic sets. So, the ANC is the one in the big problem here to lose because it can't fire its corrupt people. It is still, you have people like Zandile, Gumede, etc., extremely popular. It has done nothing about the construction mafia who have now aligned themselves with the MK. So all of those, you just have to, why you think, all of us have to put up with taxi drivers who are law unto themselves and you can't tell them anything. The police are afraid of them. You can't ticket them. It doesn't matter. You ticket them, they block the road to the airport. Everything gets written off after a few months, right? In fact, I know them. I have both patients. I have the cops and the taxi drivers and owners as my patients in KwaMashu. And I can see the impunity they have. because ANC is too scared to do anything about it. There's a huge block of votes to be lost there, other than finance and everything else. This is what we've had, this, like a mafia state, construction mafia, taxi mafia, we got now kidnapping mafia, all of them, with police working with them, with NPA prosecutors working with them. So the ANC has the largest to lose in this province. How it convinces people that putting it back in power in the municipality, it has run down to the ground in 10 years, I can't see. Mr. Zuma's persona, the reclaim, now there's a new tactic they're using, reclaiming the ANC. Everything will be fine if you get rid of Ramaphosa. And that, in one of the things we should mention is what's going to happen at the African National Congress National Convention. The machinations to get rid of Mr. Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, from within his own rank and file supporters.
It might be another Zuma again.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, he may not be able to take the leadership because technically he has been found guilty of some offenses, but clearly he doesn't, 85 now, he doesn't have to be there. He can be putting other people there, but, to carry out the same policies. Paul Mashatile, I'm sure, is waiting in the wings. And if you smell blood, you go for it.
Definitely. I think we've run out of time, Faisal, but I think you've shared some very important information with us. Your final advice to Dr. Mohamed Hoosen, I know you tipped him off that things are bad at King Edward and he must be ready for a rough ride there. He's also mentioned he's concerned about the standard of health care, but he's going in with an open mind and he reckons, I'm going to give it my best shot to help our people out there. So what's your closing advice to...
Alhamdulillah, Mohamed, I tell you, this is what I spoke to all the graduates about at the graduation. That you see, if we have a few minutes, I know you're going into town. I try to explain to the graduates, Yunus, and this is for all of us, for Muslims in general, and I'm basically stealing from what late Maulana used to tell me, I'll be pleased with him, used to say. We stand out. Our beards, our kurta, our abaya, our headscarf. As a Muslim, you stand out. In your business, in your private life, whether you go to the beachfront, and in this case, all these young healthcare professionals, you may not choose it, you may not agree with it, but you represent Islam by the virtue of how you look. You've chosen that. So you may not say, no, I'm not a representative of Islam. I got a beard and I got a topi, but no, you don't. You don't have that choice when you put yourself out there. I used to tell you, say it, accept it. You are a badge of Islam. So, as I said to them, smile. Mohamed Hoosen has learned, all of the medical students have learned the science of medicine. Now they must learn the art of healing. Medicine, as you know, when you go to the doctor, is not just a clinical diagnosis. It's the touch, it's the warmth, is when you walk. That's why some doctors are so busy and some are not. Some people just, the warmth, the touch, the shoulder on the arm, etc. The art of healing. Medicine is not only science. So that art of healing is what I try to say to the graduates, and it applies to me. We need to remind ourselves, just like we need to remind ourselves about our deen and our rules and regulations and our own faith. Is the smile that the last person, they must. I use this example that when somebody goes home from the polyclinic, who came at 6 o'clock in the morning after 5 referrals, and they finally made it to the hospital, and they stood in a queue, Yunus, to get a file. They had encountered a clerk who's fed up with their job and unhappy. Then they encountered a nurse taking their blood pressure and Mohamed itself will know exactly what I mean when you're out in these outpatients. Anyone who's been to there, perhaps our listenerships are not in that LSM category where they experience all of this. Hour for your file, hour to get your blood pressure, another hour to wait in the queue to finally see the doctor. And the doctor's got 100 other patients waiting, so you're a bit fast. But when they go home, they must be able to say, sure, it was terrible. But hey, you know what? That slum doctor, that auntie with the scarf by the pharmacy, hell, they were nice to me. They smiled. She asked me, how are you, Baba? How are you, Mr. Naidu? How are you, Gogo? Let them remember that about the Muslim that they saw with the scarf, with the beard, with the kurta, whatever. You reflect your religion. And yes, it's frustrating. I hear my son's stories, my daughter, same pharmacy, etc. So we know all of these things. but it doesn't mean you have to let the system pull you down. You must lift the system up. Even when you're short of medicines and you're short of that, the smiling, caring face, the person that they know that smiled at them that day, that spoke to them nicely, must be the Muslim, because you are a reflection of your religion. I think Mohamed Hoosen knows all this. He's much smarter than we were at his age, alhamdulillah. But it is a reminder for me too in my own practice. And I did say to them something else, which is very important when they go into private practice, that you do not have to practice medicine to make money. If you practice good, ethical, caring medicine, the money comes automatically. Not just in medicine, in anything you do. You will know one woman who makes samosas and the passion and how that woman is so busy, and someone else is making samosas and they're not so busy. It's a reflection of the care, the passion, whether it's a pizza, a furniture product you make, whatever. Your love and care into that gets reflected in the quality of your work, no matter what commodity it is.
Excellent.
And inshallah, that is something for me to remember and for whoever else, the medical students, all over.
Faisal, Suleman, I'm sure Mohamed Hoosen will definitely keep that in mind when he's joining the sort of King Edward on 1st January. On a closing note, remember the Suks coming up in 2 weeks' time. I'm sure they send you an invitation, yes. So inshallah, join us there. And our whole approach is to create, business opportunities for our stallholders. And amazingly, this year, 2 weeks before the Suk, all the stalls are sold out. And we feel very happy when people eke out a living and earn profits, because a large number of people turn out. And this is the humanitarian side of Al-Ansar we're trying to bring into our communities and to our business people, is to create economic opportunities so that 4 or 5 months into the new year, people have some funding to sustain themselves. So do join us in the Suk that's coming up, Faisal. I know you were part of it for a long time, but I'm sure we'll welcome you there. But thank you for joining us this evening, Faisal. We will have a chat sooner, maybe in the new year, about sort of further discussions on the political setup. I know that's your favorite subject and mine. And our communities out there want to listen what's happening, and then we'll do a further analysis on the issue. But have a good evening, and shukran for joining us at short notice, Dr. Faisal Suleman.
Yunus, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and salams to our young future leader, mashallah, Mohamed Hoosen. And I think it's worth maybe talking to him 6 months after his internship to maybe do a reflection of it. But inshallah, look, like I said to them, there are challenges. There were worse challenges during apartheid. We overcame them. They are young. They are, as he has told you and you've said, they want to do the best. And as I said, we all can be healers. Whatever our occupation, you don't have to be, a healthcare professional to be a healer, to be someone, even in your own family, who listens, who's empathetic. As we know, when funerals happen, all of someone is in hospital. That's why our communities often drive people in hospital mad, that we all want to go there, etc. But I know, I'll just tell you something quickly, Yunus, if we have a time. And this is very, I still remember this. When I was in intern, it was still an all-white hospital, or a final year student at Joburg, what is now Charlotte Macleod Joburg Hospital. And it just started desegregating in the 1990. And for the whites, they had never, all those white nurses in Charlotte Macleod, white patients, it was a whites only hospital, never had that experience of hundreds of visitors, right? So you had one person, bunch of flowers will come, and that used to be it. And then as he desegregated, 1 or 2 Muslim families started coming to the hospital. And I remember clearly, because I was Muslim, and of course there weren't too many of us there, but anyway, and then they started having this experience. Suddenly 7 o'clock or visiting time comes, they show 30 people, 20 people, and of course it used to drive them mad. They weren't accustomed to it, or as you know, what happens in the ward gets full, etc. But the white patients I remember this one old guy who had a stroke. He looked at me and he was crying. He said, "What's this about?" I said, "No, that's our culture, that's our religion." He started crying. He said, "Wow, we get no visitors. You'll get flowers. You'll get one person will come see you. We didn't have mobile phones that day, but they'll say, yeah, you'll get a message, but that's it. So this tradition of the healing that takes place when people come, and the empathy and all that must not be lost. Yes, it's inconvenient sometimes, but it is inherent part of our culture and our religion, and is something to be treasured.
No, most certainly, that's the human touch. Faisal, you have a good evening. Keep up with the good work over and above your medical, your work at SAMNET and others. We really appreciate the input you give us and the amount of research you do. Do continue with the good work, and inshallah in the new year we'll have a chat with you again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That was Dr. Faisal Suliman, the chairman of SAMNET, a medical practitioner. We will conclude, and I will ask Dr. Mohamed Hoosen. We gave him a long break to give us his closing remarks. Mohamed Hoosen?
I think all has already been said by Dr. Faisal, and he has also touched on some important points. But I think as far as I'm concerned, when we talk about youth apathy, when we speak about youth involvement, there is certainly something we can do as the up and coming, even the future healthcare professionals who will be serving on the front line. We must always remember our patients come first. We need to actively involve the patient in the decision making. Ultimately, it will affect them and it will impact them. And I think for those at school, we've also touched on the career path that they wish to pursue and how best to go about that. And your future is in your hands. It's literally in your hands, and what you can do, nobody can take away. And therefore, always strive for your best. I speak of a formula called CP3 or CP cubed. C is for curiosity, P1 is passion, P2 is persistence, P3 perseverance. All of these have an effect on each other. You're curious, you ask questions. You're passionate, you ask the right questions. If you are persistent, you'll search and find answers to those questions. If you persevere, you'll find answers even if they are not there. And I think when we adopt this mindset, we implement it in our everyday our day-to-day work, I'm certain that we will attain our goals, our aims, and our objectives. So in closing, I want to thank you and the team for inviting me, to this important discussion. I'm certainly appreciative, and I myself am the one to be learning and to be taking away these pearls of wisdom. So a big thank you to you and the team.
It was a pleasure having you at this interview this evening, Mohamed Hoosen. We just planned it this morning, and we were chatting before, and you were out of town, and you said, no, you'll join us. So it was meant for you to chat. And Dr. Faisal gave us some very important information. We will send you an invitation to join us in the souk before you start your intern, so that you'll have a little bit of fun at the souk. And unlike the past, the souk is there to ensure that people are chilled out, they relax, they spend some quality time, because the economy is a bit tight, and all people don't have funding to travel out. Because, when we speak about unemployment, it's quite a serious problem in the country. And in the hospitals, people are forced to get there. But we want to take this opportunity on behalf of the Board of Al Ansar to appreciate, the good effort and the awards that you've achieved, not only from IMA, but worldwide, and the manner in which you've accepted this, the humbleness, and attributing this, all, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and continue side by side with your effort to conscientize our people of the situation in Palestine. We have to have our sympathy to do our little bit, whatever we can. It comes in the hadith that you can do one of three things. One is you take physical action, and Dr. Saap was talking about it. But if we can't do that, let's talk about it. And the least we can do is to give some donation and make du'as. On that note, we thank you once again. We wish you everything of the best in your future endeavors. But we are hoping and trusting that you will join us in the studio in not too a distant future, so that you can give us a bit of an indication as to, how you're doing at Kingwood, the 8 Hospital. But feel free to join us whenever you can. Brothers and sisters, that brings us to the end of News in Focus for this evening. We're into the festive season, and hopefully we'll have one more program next week, Wednesday, and perhaps live programs from the souk on different subjects. My final advice is that, keep up with our 5-time salah, keep up with our remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, keep up with the humanitarian and good work. And until we chat again next Wednesday, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
तेरे दुआओं से